What is the greatest rock and roll band in the world? Well, it's Van Halen, isn't it? And after, obviously, the sad death of Eddie Van Halen last week, I've been spending a lot of time listening to all of the albums. But which one is best? Which one do you think? Here's my ranking of the 12 Van Halen studio albums. Let's get ready to rock! Welcome back to Rocker's Beer Review. Today we're doing a ranking video from this band, Van Halen, the greatest rock and roll party band of all time. Obviously the sad news of Eddie Van Halen passing, as I mentioned in the intro. You don't realise how much of an impact this guy has until you know any sort of icon. You know how big they are when unfortunately they die and they're no longer here. The amount of musicians of all types of rock musicians, the news, there've been loads and loads of media coverage on this, and there's been loads of YouTube videos, and I hope some of them you've watched them and you've enjoyed them as well, just to sort of reignite that interest in Van Halen as a band that, to be honest, had their real heyday in the sort of late 70s and 80s. So I want to do the ranking of the videos. Obviously, when I was really sort of moved by the fact that Eddie's passing, and I really wanted to sort of listen to his stuff back again, and especially I'm a big Sammy Hagar fan, which a lot of Van Halen fans have now switched off because they believe that the ultimate Van Halen is with David Lee Roth. But I'm a real big fan of Sammy Hagar, and although I am a fan of the early stuff as well, I don't think I'd given it as much of a listen, certainly for a long time. So it was good to go back to those albums, especially like Van Halen 2 and Diver Down, Women and Children First. Those are and Fair Warning. They're the sort of albums between Van Halen 1 and 1984 that sort of it was difficult to remember which were the great tracks from each of those albums. So re-listening to them has really sort of reignited my interest in those albums and that David Lee Roth era, basically. The other thing I want to say before I start the ranking, obviously I'm babbling on here a little bit, is that what I've realised is that as much as all those albums are great, a lot of the times when a band loses its lead singer, it's really difficult to sort of to be as successful. But a lot of bands, have changed their, the guitarist, the drummer, the bass player, whatever. But I think with someone like Van Halen, you take Eddie Van Halen away from the band, and as great as a band that they were, and as great as David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar being singers and frontmen to the band, and a lot of people say real part of that band. I think taking away Eddie's guitar sound, nobody can come in and replace him in that. So that's how you realise what an icon he is, when he's sort of almost irreplaceable. I mean, there's been some rumours that Van Halen should carry on without Eddie Van Halen. To be honest, just call it a day. Live on the legacy of these great 12 albums. So let's get the ranking. Actually, before I start this, I'm just going to have a little beer. I don't always drink a beer when I do the ranking videos, but I think this is American Pale Ale. Got it from the supermarket. It's in a lovely little pink and orange, or purple and orange, I'm going colourblind here, can. It's an American Pale Ale. So I thought, American Pale Ale, what could be a better type of beer to drink when we're celebrating one of the greatest American rock bands. So I'm not going to do a full review of this. I'm going to drink it, and you may get some opinions throughout. It's fruity. It smells pretty good. Here's to you, Eddie. Let's get on with this ranking then. So, in 12th place, I'll be surprised if there's anyone that doesn't have this album in their least favourite of all Van Halen albums, and that's Van Halen 3. This was obviously the album with Gary Cherone, who used to be an Extreme fronting, but the whole album is a mess. It's a disaster. There's no real great songs on it. The production's a bit muddy. I think, that there wasn't really the sort of massive guitar breaks from Eddie that you would expect. And really, it just did not work. And I think a lot of people this was the final nail in the coffin, really. So, Van Halen 3 comes in at number 12. 11th place. For me, Different Kind of Truth. Now, this was the album that is their latest album, I suppose you could say. It was released with David Lee Roth back in the band. Everyone was excited, but pretty much they took old demos of of some of their stuff that they did in the sort of 70s and early 80s, and just sort of re-recorded them a little bit. There's some interesting tracks on there, but again, David Lee Roth's vocals aren't as strong as they were. He wasn't ever the greatest singer, and it doesn't really work for me. And you know what's missing more than anything? Michael Anthony. A Van Halen album without Michael Anthony on bass and backing vocals, to me, is always going to be a bit disappointing. So I'm putting that in 11th place. In 10th place, now this is where we start getting controversial, I'm putting Diver Down. Now, there's some great tracks on this album, but 5 of the 12 tracks are covers. And it's only a sort of 30-odd minute album. It's quite short. And to me, as much as I like Hang 'Em High, there's a lot of tracks on there that are either sort of, as you say, there's things like Oh Pretty Woman, Where Have All the Good Times Gone, which is another Kinks song. So there's a lot of covers on there. It seems a bit of a throwaway album, really, as if they couldn't be bothered to actually sit down and write. Obviously, at this point, you sort of you would think, well, is the band going to be sort of, on its downward spiral? But I think, obviously, half the albums that came out after that's proved they didn't. But I'm putting Diver Down in 10th. I don't know if anyone would agree or disagree with you. Interested to know? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to have another drink. It's an unremarkable American Pale Ale, this. But, it's wet, and that's all you need, really, when I'm doing these sort of ranking videos. In 9th place is Balance. Now, this was the last album with Sammy Hagar. It is at this point we got good albums. I think this is a good album. I love the last song on it, Feeling, but this came out sort of at the height of grunge, and it tried to be a bit more heavier, a bit more grungier. Some of the early songs are quite good, but there's a lot of filler in here. And although it's a bit heavier, I think there was a lot of, at this point, that Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen weren't getting on, and I think you can tell that the lyrics just are not working as well for this. So, Balance in number 9th. But if you haven't heard this album, the last track, Feeling, is a superb song. In 8th place, Women and Children First. Another, it's a David Roth era album. It's quite fast-paced, got some good heavy guitar playing on it. I really love songs like Lost Control, which is a sort of not a song that many people know, but it's a great song. And Could This Be Magic, which is a sort of little sort of ditty, really. But it's a good album. There's some good tracks on it. But Women and Children First is in 8th place. Now, in 7th place is Fair Warning. Now, I know a lot of people really, really like this album, and to be honest, I sort of dismissed it a lot of the times. I knew there were some good tracks on it, Sinner Swing, Unchained, but there's a few other really good songs on it, like Mean Streets, as well as quite a few others. But again, these albums are at a time when they were much shorter. They've got to hit you quite quickly, and I had to put it somewhere, and I think Fair Warning at 7th. It's quite dark. The album cover is definitely sort of very sort of darker, less sort of summer rock that you would associate yourself with Van Halen. In 6th place is Van Halen 2. Now, Van Halen 1 is a superb album. You'll see it quite high up in the rankings here, but Van Halen 2 had to follow that. And again, I knew there was good tracks on it. Songs like Bottoms Up, Somebody Get Me a Doctor. They were ones that I really knew really well. But when I listened to it again, songs like Light Up the Sky, DOA, these are songs that that don't get played very often, and when you listen to them, you think these are great songs. And I really actually enjoyed Van Halen 2. I think it's a really good album, considering how it had to follow. It's the second album syndrome is quite common with bands. How can they create a fantastic debut album and then have to try and top that? But Van Halen 2 is a pretty good album, so I'm putting it in 6th place. Right, top 5. In 5th place is For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. Obviously, it's also known as its acronym, which I'm not going to say on the channel because there may be kids listening. But this is a really great album. Again, a lot of people sort of say, oh, I don't really like this album. It sounds a bit flat. But I actually think it's got a great sound on it. It was produced by Andy Johns, who produced a lot of stuff with Led Zeppelin. And it really creates a much more sort of live sound. You can hear the bass in it. I mean, it obviously followed the likes of 5150 and OU812, which you know, at that point in the late 80s, they were the albums were becoming really polished and overproduced, and you know, Eddie was using synth guitars and stuff like that at this point. So I think there's a real back to basics, and there's some fabulous songs on it. I really like songs like, you know, Right Now, Pleasure Dome is another sort of, you know, track that not many people hear, but there's some absolutely superb bass playing by Michael Anthony on that track. Judgment Day. There's some it's a really good album, and I just really like the sound of it. It just sounds really sort of, you know, just sort of, I wouldn't say raw, but just a nicely produced sort of, as if there's not much overproduction on this album. I think it's really good. So that's my 5th place. Now in 4th place now we're getting to some superb albums now. 4th place, 1984. I mean, a lot of people would probably say this is their best album because it's got Jump on it, it's got Panama on it, huge tracks. Hot for Teacher, another massive track. But again, there's a lot of other songs on there that you sort of forget about. I'll Wait is a brilliant song. House of Pain, a really heavy sort of song. Really enjoyed that. I mean, this is obviously the last album with David Lee Roth. He wanted to go off and do his own thing. And to be honest, I think it was better for it, because I really love the first couple of David Lee Roth albums. I think they're brilliant. The ones with Steve Vai playing guitar on. And obviously the Van Halen albums with Sammy Hagar after that. So you had one great band that then split up and created 2 great bands. So, you know, that's a good thing. So 1984 in 4th. 3rd place, now this is probably going to be the controversial to a lot of people, is OU812. A lot of people don't like it. It's a bit slick. It's a very American. It sounds very corporate-y. When It's Love is the massive, massive ballad that was on that album. But I really love the first few tracks on it. Mine or Mine's brilliant. Source of Infection is really good. All Fired Up's great. Cubbo Wubbo is a real sort of almost like Led Zeppelin sort of real sort of mini epic. I really like that song. But OU812, to some extent, was a time when I was getting into the music, and it was probably my first Van Halen album I actually bought. So it has strong memories for me, and I really do enjoy this album. I think it's a good album. Some brilliant guitar playing on it as well. In number 2 position, so runner-up position for the best album by Van Halen. Again, this may be controversial to a lot of people, but I'm putting it as Van Halen 1. It is a superb album, don't get me wrong. If I was going to tell someone, well, what's Van Halen all about, you know, give me one album to listen to, I'd probably give them Van Halen 1, because even though it's so, you know, it came out in the 70s, but it's got Eruption on it. It's got Eddie Van Halen's signature solo on there. But all the other songs on it are really, really good. Running with the Devil, Atomic Punk, absolutely superb songs. Even things like Ain't Talking About Love and Ice Cream Man, Jamie's Crying. It's packed full of great, great songs. And as I've said before, if you saw my Eddie Van Halen tribute, I think it's probably the best debut album by a band ever, you know. And I don't think you can't say much stronger than that. A really great great album, but it only makes 2nd place in the Van Halen albums. So 1st place for me is 5150. When I think of Van Halen, I think of summer. Every year goes by, and you know, we're going into sort of winter, then into sort of spring. Then when spring sort of turning into summer and the weather starts getting a bit warmer, we start getting the shorts out, we start getting the t-shirts on. For me, 5150 is that album that I'm going to play, because it makes me think of summertime. I don't know whether when I listened to it when I was younger, it was because I listened to it a lot in the summer, but it really conjures up for me what Van Halen's all about. And it's all about rock and roll. It's all about summertime. It's all about California. It has all that that whole vibe. Just really sort of you know, means a lot to me. And I think 5150 is excellent. This is an album. This was their first #1 album. Obviously, they had, you know, a lot of people thought that they were dead after David Lee Roth left the band, but Sammy Hagar came in and they wrote absolute stunning songs. Dreams, 5150, Why Can't This Be Love, Good Enough, Summer Nights. It goes on and on and on. It's just a really great, but for me, it's more about the vibe. It's more about the fact that it makes me think about summer. And for me, 5150, the song has got the best Eddie Van Halen solo on it. So go out and listen to 5150. It's a great summer rock and roll album, and I don't think there's an album that really, you know, sort of demonstrates, really sort of gives that sort of feeling of summer and rock. and also to some extent the 80s, you know, and which are the three things I love. So, number one position is 5150. That is my ranking of the albums. What do you think? What's your favourite album? What's your favourite Van Halen song? What's your favourite Eddie Van Halen solo? There's lots of those great. I think everyone's got their own opinions on it, but this band, I can't tell you how much of an impact this band had on me in terms of listening to rock music in general. It just sort of opened up everything to what guitar playing was all about, what real, you know, showmanship and frontman sort of things with David Lee Roth. You know, there's no one as a frontman that comes as close as David Lee Roth. I don't think he's as great. He's a great singer, but as a frontman, you know, he's up there with the top frontmen of all time. So I hope you enjoy the ranking. I'm really interested to know what everyone else thinks about the best Van Halen album. And until the next one, I'm going to enjoy this American Pale Ale. Don't forget, you know what you have to do? Keep on rocking.